welcome back to another Professor of Thrones breakdown. Sorry I wasn't around last week. I've talked about this in previous of these podcasts, but I'm in the middle of a process of moving to a different state, and it's still an ongoing process that's going piecemeally. So if you're looking for my usual standard, like fully edited scripted breakdown videos, they're unfortunately not going to be able to happen for the rest of this season just because of the sheer schedule and how few episodes we have left. So sorry about that, but I still don't want to give you guys without content, so I'm giving you these freeform off the cuff podcast breakdowns. I'm actually coming to you live from a hotel right now, so if you hear any background noise or anything like that, that is exactly why. Anyway, before we dive into the episode proper, other than a quick apology for not being around last week, I also wanted to touch upon the play. I don't know if you've heard about this, but there was a Game of Thrones Song of Ice and Fire. Well, this is actually the book continuity. So, Song of Ice and Fire prequel play. I believe it was called Game of Thrones: The Mad King, and it was not on Broadway. It was not in London. It was in another. I had this. I totally blanking on it. It's another town or village or city somewhere in England. I must sound so uneducated right now. God. Anyway, it was disastrous for a little while because they kept on canceling the premiere of the play the day of, sending people, and because of that, essentially what's happening is that everyone that had booked a ticket for that day, many of whom traveled from different, not only across England, but different countries. I know there are a few Australian Assault of Ice and Fire YouTubers that went and their showing was canceled. So they were canceling things day of because of the failure of effects. I think there was major pyrotechnics in the play. And once I get into the subject material real quickly, it'll make sense why. And I think they were having major issues with that. But finally, before I get into actually that, I just want to say it's kind of really fucked up for people that were coming and traveling and then only get their showing canceled and they're not rescheduled. They're offered a refund because obviously everything's booked up. So you can't just reschedule a whole group to another day because that day is already booked with people. And that compounded and happened, like, I think there were 5 cancellations or something like that before the premiere actually went through. So I feel really bad for everyone who tried to go. I feel bad for the team who was probably desperately trying to put on this play and it was just not working. Something was going wrong every time. But they finally nailed it. And I believe last night, from when I'm recording this, I'm not sure if it's when I'm actually going to be able to upload this, was the actual premiere of the play. And it's been so much fun trying to decipher what happened in this play because obviously it's not a book release, it's not a show release. You can't just watch it or read it. It is something you can only hear about if you're not able to go, and I'm not able to fly out to England right now and spend thousands of dollars to get to this remote area of England to see this play. It's so much fun trying to essentially piece together the contents of this play, just from, like, I'm mainly using Tumblr, but like Tumblr posts alone. So essentially, for context, the subject material covers is the events of the 20th Harrenhal and Robert's Rebellion, which is essentially the prelude stuff for the main Game of Thrones: A Song of Ice and Fire series. So it's essentially like everything that led up to the context of that story. So the immediate, like, 20 years before that. And from what I've heard and what I've tried to piece together, there's some very interesting choices and developments. And I actually made it. I posted about this. I posted this on Tumblr, but it was essentially like I said something like, I could pull it up while we talk. But yeah, I don't think I'm ready to make a video about it just yet, or a podcast about it just yet, because it's not concrete in any way. You know, it's just hearsay and hearing what people are saying about it from their experience of going. I think I'll have to wait to actually fully cover it substantively until it either A, the script gets published as a book and I can read it physically, or B, it comes to a theater where I can actually see it myself, and then you'll probably get a full, like, separate dedicated video to it. But Let me see if I could find it. Yeah, so I wrote, having to piece together the A Song of Ice and Fire play by perusing the posts of primary sources, people who got to see it last night, and decipher little nuggets of information is perhaps the most A Song of Ice and Fire thing possible. And that's absolutely true. It is the most A Song of Ice and Fire thing possible to take little nuggets and pieces of information and try to extrapolate from that and come up with like coherent statements from it. It's just how we interpret the series, and now we're actually doing it IRL with like real primary sources. It's just very meta, and I love it, and it's a part of why I love being a part of this community and getting to experience this story in this world. It's like one of my favorite things in existence. So, you know, with all the trouble that this play has, I'm really happy that it went off finally, and people are like have issues with it. There are some issues and points of concern, but overall people are seemingly very intrigued and happy by it, and it's giving us a lot of new developments and like nuggets. So I really want to see it. God, I really want to see it. Anyway, let us jump into the episode proper. I'm very interested into where I don't know if interested is the right word. Maybe confused is the right word, to where exactly the show is going, because there are so many deviations that from the book that are happening lately that are key, and I feel like this was the most. So it's been happening a lot throughout the season, but I think this was definitely the most stark since episode 1, particularly around the Raina and Corley stuff this time, and the Allison stuff this time as well. It just seems like they're like, how are they going to hit the main plot points? Like, are they going to divert so much to abandon the main plot points, like the crux of the story? And I'm not going into any spoilers. This is a spoiler free series here, but I just am very. There are certain things that need to happen pretty soon that cannot happen right now by the state things are. And I'm very interested to see how they're going to handle that. They could do it well. They have done things well in the past, quite a lot that are deviated from the books, but I'm just very concerned that they're going to try to abandon core plot points to try something new, and that's when I'd go as far as to say it's an insult to George's work, which I don't think it's at that level yet, even though a lot of people are saying that. But I feel like if it gets to that point, there's some key set pieces that are like the core of his story that I'm worried aren't going to happen. But we'll see. We'll see. I think the way they handled the Gullet situation, episode 1, was kind of teetering on that, but we'll see. There's a lot of weird decisions. I can't speak until it happens. You know, I can't really say either direction yet. I am refraining from giving an opinion on that front. Anyway, let's dive into the content of the episode proper. So we start with a iconic scene from the book, which is the butcher's ball scene. That's what it's called in the book, but it's when it's Kristen Cole's death scene, and it was pretty much page for page from the book, the way that they like pretended to be bodies and hoisted up, but they actually, interestingly enough, sort of split it into two scenes, because the thing they did at the end of the last episode of the Feast for Traitors display was kind of borrowed from the Butcher's Ball sequence. So they like come upon, they actually in the woods, they come up, and it's actually really creepy in the book. Kristen and his men come across essentially all of these dead bodies of rivermen propped up at a table, like around a meal, kind of in that like iconography of the Feast for Traitors scene in the last episode, and they leap up from there. So it's very similar. So I feel like they wanted to do it, split it out like that to get two exciting scenes and creepy scenes instead of just one, which is fine. I don't think it was that much big of a deviation. There was a key line though that I think they removed from the scene where Stark says to Kristen, there will be no songs sung of you. I'll make sure of it, or something like that. I can't remember the exact lines. And I think that's a key line because it parallels Kristen's desire. His whole like ethos behind this campaign was that he wanted like the glory and legacy of like songs being sung about him. And I think that like that finishing line, like the final thing Kristen hears, like oh, you're just gonna be dead in the mud and no songs will be sung about you. It's just, I hate that they pulled out that line. That's like such a perfect encapsulation of Kristen Cole, this absolute piece of shit fuckboy character, like his, that's like the ultimate final sting. And I don't like that they removed that key line from the book, but otherwise the scene was pretty much spot on. And I still really like the core of the scene, how like how he died so pathetically, how he ended with a whimper after everything. And I think it's so deserved for such a piece of shit human being, and I think they captured that quite well. Um, Anyway, so the Baratheons have been out of this war. They've been, dilly dallying, and it's really fucked up because Aemond, they like actually betrothed one of their daughters to Aemond. Technically, if you remember, we never see her, and they never actually send her, so it's not like something that's we're reminded of. But yeah, Boros Baratheon is just he just whatever he can do to not fight. And so he sends this half-assed delegation to King's Landing to say, "Oh, we would fight, but we have to go take care of the Vulture King." And if you don't know, the Vulture King in the books it's a very minor part of the story, but there's essentially in Dorne before it's part of what the Seven Kingdoms proper, like the Westerosi country. It's its own separate country still at this point in the timeline. They were essentially there was a title kind of called the Vulture King, which different like criminals or like rogue lords would take on, and they would essentially take on this title of the Vulture King and conduct raids into what Westeros proper, into the Stormlands. And yeah, it's an issue. Yeah, it's something that the Stormland leaders, particularly House Baratheon, would have to deal with. But it's definitely in this case they're extremely over exaggerating the issue with this Vulture King. It's implied in the book that like he's just a petty criminal. He's not even like a big nuisance at all. And they're just like, oh, we only have to go deal with that, so we can't help you, Rhaenyra. And it's like they're trying to like not really pick a side and just they're just being shitty altogether and have no integrity. But anyway, so the men like they come, they give their half spiel, and it's not their fault, they're just sent as messengers. But Rhaenyra has an idea, a spark in her eye, and she's like, wow, we can do something here. And she takes their uniforms and sends fake assassins to Tumbleton to try to get at to assassinate Ormond and Darren. And yeah, I wonder how Allison would feel about that if it worked. Like it didn't work, obviously. So I don't even think Rhaenyra's gonna tell her, or if she did in this episode, I don't even remember. Yeah, I wonder how that would have gone. But she sends them, and she purposely, remembering Allison's advice about Ormond's like aversion to smells, made them incredibly dirty and like filthy and like on the road appearing. And but Gawain noticed, he's like, I've met one of these guys before. That's not him. And it clicked for him, and if Gawain wasn't there, they would have been cooked. And it just shows you like little pieces of fate. And I think it's a big part of like A Song of Ice and Fire and Fire and Blood, which is the book this is based on. It's like like little pieces of fate to where someone happens to be at the right place at the right time. And it's like the big moral question of like, is this prophecy, is this destiny that someone's there, is this like a predetermined fate, or is it just coincidence? And it's like a big theme in A Song of Ice and Fire, I would say. And this was like a little like nugget of that. It was a good sequence, but yeah, it's just such a tragic situation. It's because like when we see Darren talking to Gawain alone, we get the sense that Darren is not like, he's being manipulated, sure, but he fully understands and comprehends what's going on. He has no delusions of grandeur about Ormond, and no like, oh, Ormond's doing the right thing. He knows he's a villain, and he's just essentially a prisoner. He's a hostage. It's not even Stockholm syndrome. It's just being a prisoner. And it's just so tragic to see him like pleading with Gawain. He's like, please help me here. And Gawain just can't do it, And it's just, we'll see how that shifts after the end of this episode, because I feel like Ormond's probably going to be like, I underestimated you, Gawain. Like, you actually have a purpose here. And we'll see where that goes from there, and see what, because actually at this point I could actually spoil this because it didn't happen. Wayne actually was back in King's Landing for when Rhaenyra takes the city, and he's killed during that situation. So like that didn't happen. So I could say that because they're just completely doing a different route. Wayne's with Wayne's arc here, but it's also interesting that they're definitely trying to lead in with some like implications of him being gay or maybe bi in some way. There was like kind of a little bit of hints. It was like very subtextual of him having something with like a little thing for Kristen Cole. Why the fuck would you have a thing for Kristen Cole? Jesus Christ! But anyway, he's Green faction anyway, Green. So he's not a perfect person. um, so, but yeah, Orman makes jokes about it too. So it's clearly like something that like people that are close to Wayne might know about him. So it's interesting. I'm always for LGBTQ representation. So I feel like that was an interesting, good addition that we didn't really get in the book. Um, Anyway, so back in King's Landing, we have the Gold Cloaks. It seemed like it was like almost all of them, if not all of them, quitting their job because they haven't been paid. All of their men are getting killed. It makes sense, and they're not conscripted soldiers. It's not like the Damon can be like, no, you're forced to stay here, you're a deserter, you're getting executed. No, they are employees. It's like employees of a company. They can quit whenever they want. You know, sure, like if the king is feeling really or queen is really like if Rainier was feeling really particularly fascist, you could say, order you to do this on the face of death. And sure, she's an absolute monarch, so she could, but it's not really culturally how they're employees, they're not soldiers, they can leave. So they all quit. So there's no one protecting the city. It could get it now with all that, it's gonna get even worse. So Rainier is desperate and she thinks, okay, we gotta get the Valorian soldiers that Corlys left with back because they'll protect the city. So she sends Alan to, go. Adam and Alan, I always fucking confuse them. Why did they do two A names? I'm 99% sure it's Alan. Alan of all. It's Alan, I'm right. Okay. Yeah, so she sends Alan to go get Corlys back, and it kind of works. And they have like an interesting exchange where like Corlys is like, "How are you still doing her bidding when she refuses to give you your birthright?" He's like, "You refused to give me my birthright for 20 years, and I was like still loyal to you, you know." And Corlys is like, "You got me there. You got me there." And Alan like has a really good rational head about him, where he's like, "Listen, like she's not perfect, but she's definitely the better of the choice here, and she has room to grow. She's a new queen, like she has room to grow here, and I trust her and like align with her. We'll have to wait and see whether his trust is right or not, but he convinces Corlys to come back. But I'll cut to the end of the episode now. Before Corlys comes back, he gets kidnapped by Boljon Roxton, who is like the right hand man of Ormond. How did John Roxton know where Corlys was? First of all, like, sure, he's out fighting Triarchy pirates, but that could be anywhere along the Crownlands coast. That could be anywhere. So he found him specifically. Unless he had a mole, he could have a mole. That's very, very probable. They could have spies. Ormond could have spies everywhere. Okay, sure, let's say that's the case. But how did he get there so fast? Like, right, he was earlier in this episode, he was in Tumbleton, and Tumbleton is not close. I think this goes back to my theory that I said a few videos ago, that I think the show is changing where the location of Tumbleton is to make it like close proximity to King's Landing, because it's not in the book. It's not very close. It's pretty substantively like a distance away. So how did he get there? I don't know, but I think this is one of the big deviations from the book that I'm very concerned about, because like Corlys is not supposed to be getting kidnapped and being taken to Tumbleton in the book. He's supposed to be doing something else. And I will not say what or where or anything, but this is a new development. So who knows, maybe, next episode he can escape right away and go do whatever. But, you never know. You never know what they're going to do. So, anyway, going back to Alan quickly. Back at King's Landing, he's just starts smooching with Bela, and I'm like, it feels like it came absolutely out of nowhere in the show. That's all I'll say. I'm not going to spoil like their dynamic in the books or anything like that. But in the show, it feels like there was no build up to it. It came out absolutely nowhere. And even in the book, I'll say that they do have something romantic. And even in the book, it happens later. It happens like what would be like second half of season 4 material, if I had to guess. So there's time for it to brew and develop, you know. And this is just like out of nowhere, you know. It's just like, okay, I guess they're a thing now. Um, and it's interesting that it's happening so early because now it's like, well, okay, if Rhaenyra gets wind of this, how is she gonna react? You know, it's like it's just weird that it's happening right now, and what the consequences of that will be now. But you know, I'll give them faith and see how they handle it. You know, um, people were like Jason's corpse isn't even cold yet, and I'm like, yeah, it's kind of cold. It's been implied to be months since the Battle of the Gullet. You know, I think it's fine in that sense. It's just weird that it wasn't developed at all. Like they had one conversation before this, right? I think if anything, Adam and her had more chemistry, but and when we had that Adam and Bela chemistry scene, I was confused because I was like, they're not a thing. But you know, we never know what the show is doing, so we'll see. Um, Anyway, going back to the Gold Coast quitting, Damon's like, fuck it, I gotta get to the bottom of this. And he wears like the worst gold cloak disguise possible. I was like cringing at it. It just looked awful. And I don't know if that was intentional for the story itself, like the show itself, to be like, okay, he's supposed to look like bad. But or if that was just a shitty costume. But anyway, you know, he confronts the guy, and actually someone pointed this out in between. I think it was History of Westeros podcast pointed this out, and I did not notice this, so this was a great catch. This guy is actually this guy that's like running this whole operation for Ormond, seemingly is actually the guy who Alicent told from the guards at the walls of the city, told to stand down when Rhaenyra comes, and ordered him to do so with Helena in episode 2. And it's the same guy, and I didn't make that connection when I was watching, but it actually is, and that's pretty cool. That's pretty interesting, and it shows that he's like a Green faction loyalist to the core, so much so that it'll splinter off into this new branch of the Green faction rather than even allow with Rhaenyra. And Daemon actually pushes him on that. He's like, Rhaenyra did nothing to you guys, and he's like, I don't give a fuck. He's like, I am. He's like, we're green till we die, essentially. And he makes like a very interesting point. He's like, we're, you know, it's not like how many of you are there. It's an idea, it's a movement. There is a discontent in the city. You know, there is a big displeasement with Rhaenyra and her rule. She's not been good so far. And people are getting pissed, and it's like it's a widespread thing. It's not just me and my assassins specifically. This is a idea you can't contain. You can't go around killing certain people to get this idea out. It's spread already. So now there's like, you know, that hits him. You know, he snaps and kills him anyway, but that hits him. It's like, oh shit, like there's major discontent for, you know, for Rhaenyra in her seat of power city, you know, and that's concerning. And then of course, showing more discontent himself, he, you know, comes across Dolph. That was started off as a very funny scene, and then he just totally abuses him, and it's in front of everyone. You know, it's in front of all these small folk, making them more like, oh, look at these, like, you know, like fascist dragon rider Nazi assholes. See, they could probably tell at that point that it was Daemon. You know, like anyone can recognize like his platinum hair. You know, I guess it depends on who you are. You know, but so it could be if they recognize him, could be not, but they're just like, how much more abuse is Ulf really going to take, you know? And he's teetering, you know? He's not got much left in him before he's like, fuck this. You could just tell. And then, you know, on the other end, we have the other dragon seed. We didn't see Adam this episode, but two of the three dragon seeds are having issues. So we got Hugh, you know, he sneaks into the city proper in Tumbleton after being outskirts outside. Interesting that he was able to do it, but you know, suspension of disbelief, it's fine. He sneaks in, you know, he finds his wife, and she doesn't want to have anything to do with him anymore. She is like, you know, like, I suffered so much You know, you were trying to do the right thing and you were trying to help me, but that's not what I ever wanted. I just wanted you by my side, and you were gone. You know, you abandoned me, and I suffered so much and dealt with so much hardship and horrible atrocities, and you were nowhere to be found. And I know you say you're trying to help me and do something good. That was never what I asked for, never what I wanted. And she's like, I'm done. And so now Hugh's motivation is fucked too. So now I got two of the three Dragon Riders are completely shattered right now and disillusioned. So we'll see where that goes. Um, Speaking of Dragon Riders that are kind of like fucky, let's move over to Reyna and the Veil. This plot just frustrates me so incredibly, even though Jane Eyre is just awesome. But this plot frustrates me so much because it's clearly the show just like bending over backwards to make up shit to justify their shift of removal of the book character Nettles and combining her role into the Reyna story. And it's like they can't do it. They're not pulling it off. You know, you can't cut one of the core characters of the story out and give it to another character and like make this Modge Podge weird character that now fits no purpose. You know, Rain in the book was a separate character doing separate things. Nettles in the book was a separate character doing separate things. Now, and both of them were key to the story. And now you have this Modge Podge hybrid character here that is doing neither. They're just making up scenarios for her because they can't do either of those routes anymore because they changed her so fundamentally contextually. And it just sucks. Like, just why didn't they just do Nettles? Like, I've talked about this to death in my podcast, but she's one of the best characters from the book, and they just cut her completely for no reason. It's really like what they did in Game of Thrones when they cut young Griff, aka Fagon, who's like one of the most intriguing. Fagon and John Connington are like two of the most intriguing characters in A Song of Ice and Fire, and they cut them entirely in their entire plot line for the Game of Thrones show. And it almost feels like a similar one. It's nowhere near as egregious as cutting Fagon and John Connington, but it's still pretty egregious. So I really, it really frustrates me, but we'll see what happens there. I'm kind of saving the best for last year, so I just want to get like a little point. So Rhaenyra, bad queen, bad mom. She's just giving like these shit. I know she's like sort of panicking and giving these awful responses to the small folk that are petitioning her. And she just doesn't know how to conduct herself here. And something happens. She cuts herself on the throne. And in the book, I kind of like this switch because in the book, she cuts herself on the throne as she's first ascending it. And here they shifted it to when she's actively doing things that are making her a bad ruler. And for the context on this, in the mythology of the Song of Ice and Fire series, the Iron Throne has some sort of, it could just be an it's like could be an actual magical core to it. It could be a just interpretation in the masses that like where they took something that's happened multiple times throughout history and sort of made their own narrative about it. But essentially there's a narrative amongst like people that essentially says like, you know, if you get cut on the throne, it means the throne's rejecting you and you're not fit to be the good ruler. And here, you know, we see Rhaenyra get cut after she's making poor decisions. So I like that. I like that shift where it didn't happen like it did in the book, where it happens like right away when she first steps on, because she hadn't done anything yet, you know. So I really like this change. Actually, I think it's well done. And you know, she notices it and she's like, oh shit. And the throne, because of the way a past Targaryen, Maegor, who was probably one of if not the worst kings of all time, died, where he was just like cut up completely by the throne, and that's actually like a theory of how he died. And I think because of that, she's like, the small folk actually already know of the throne situation where if it cuts it, you're fucked. And I think she realized that and was like, I gotta get out of here. She was also panicking because of all the requests and everything, so it was like a mix of both, but she just fled, and that looks even worse, you know. And she's also a bad mom. We don't know if she's just been going to see her third son, Joffrey, if she's been going to see him regularly or not. we just see this is the second time we see her coming in, he's already sleeping, and we could guess that maybe she's hasn't seen him yet, and it's been like weeks or a month, and she still hasn't even seen him yet. And it should be the first thing she's doing in the morning, to be quite frank. And it's Joffrey is heir to the throne. I know that's probably part of her hesitancy, is that she doesn't want to lose another son. She's lost two of her sons who were heirs, and now Joffrey's the heir, and she just doesn't want to do it again. She doesn't want to get close. She just wants to keep a distance so it doesn't hurt as much. But also, she's not priming him. He is heir to the throne. He's a kid, but he's heir to the throne. The second if she were to go, you know, he's next in line, and he has nothing. He has no knowledge. He has no relationships. He's just in his room cooped up. And I think that's really, really fucky. Rhaenyra's making some bad decisions, and it's compounding, especially with everything going on in the city. So before we sort of go to what I think is like the most interesting core, I want to talk about Aegon quickly. So, Thailand is like still trying to push for them to go to Casterly Rock and set up a court there, which is, the headquarters of House Lannister. And it's a really shitty idea. First of all, you have to travel across the entire width of Westeros to get to Casterly Rock, because they're on the East Coast right now, and Casterly Rock's on the West Coast. So much danger and so much possible issues you could counter on that route. But also, it's clearly that he wants to do it for his own personal gain. If Aegon were to start a seat like at Casterly Rock, it would make him insane. It would make Thailand insanely more powerful. So there's an element of personal gain there too. But it was a very funny scene where Aegon's starting to learn. He's like, "What do you think? Do you think I'm a bad person?" And Thailand's stumbling and stuttering and doesn't know what to say. He's like, "Listening to you, Larry. So we're going to Bravos," and which is, the other direction. They're going across the narrow sea to a different continent, different country. And I think that's the smart move, to lay low in a different country, especially when a lot of Aegon's funds are stored in the Iron Bank of Bravos right now. I think that's the smarter move. And it's interesting. I wonder if Larry's Larry's being as Machiavellian and kind of fucked up as he is, I wonder if that entire speech he didn't even care behind it. It wasn't actually a piece of true energy from him, and it was actually just another manipulation to make him Aegon start down this arc of development. I don't know. You never know with Larry's, but yeah, I thought that was a funny scene, and looks like they're going to Bravos. If you've just watched the show, Bravos from Game of Thrones, because that's where Arya trained to be a faceless assassin. That's a Venetian city. But anyway, let's get to the core of this episode, in my opinion, which is all the stuff with Helena, Alice Rivers. So Alicent is dealing with Helena and trying to get through there with the whole situation. And I totally skipped something. Let me go. Speaking of Alicent, Rhaenyra is now sending her to... we'll go in this order. Alicent finally notices Helena's tapestries. We know Helena is a dreamer. We know she just has the dragon tree magical abilities, and she has so much magical power that is not being acknowledged by anyone, and all of her prophecies are being ignored. And Alicent finally notices what's going on, because she sees in in the tapestry something clear. She sees Aemond. I mean, it's not clear, it's metaphorical, but she sees Aemond. He's in this swirled vortex of red. So, it could be interpreted as a womb, it could be interpreted as a vagina, it could be interpreted as just a magical vortex, probably thematically all of the above. And he's just crumpled up, swirled in this vortex, and the vortex is coming from a sinister looking woman with almost serpentine woman. And we obviously know this is Alice Rivers control over Aemond. And that's the first time we really see Alicent realizes what's going on. Well, no, because she says later it happens in the plural when talking about Helena to Rhaenyra. And Allison tries to use that as sort of bargaining for her and Helena's life. Like, I know where Eamon is. And you see when she reveals that, she says, like, Helena has this ability in that where like she sees things and says things and they often come true. And Rhaenyra immediately clicks. She's like, she's a dreamer. She's a dragon dreamer. Oh shit! Like, I've had this tool with me all along, and had no idea. And I think that's one of like the tragic ironies of like a lot of Song of Ice and Fire plots, when the people that really are in tune to magic are saying what's really going on, and the stuffy political players are just like, I'm not even bothering with this magic shit. I just want my political gains. When the magic shit is really what's going to bite them in the ass in the end. And that's kind of the thematic core of the main Song of Ice and Fire series. And we see it happening here firsthand. So Rainier is like, you know what? I'm sending you to Harrenhal to go get Aemond and, well, lower his guard so he can get assassinated, essentially. I'll watch Helena myself, and I'm very interested to see the Helena Rhaenyra dynamic, because in the book we don't hear of them ever interacting or ever getting Rhaenyra ever getting the message that Helena is a dreamer. So I'm very interested to see how that dynamic unfolds, because it could have very well happened off the page and we just don't know. So it's one of those things that the show is filling in that I think is good, but I'm very interested to see how their seeds go. I could see it just being like Rhaenyra screaming at her and Elena snapping. Like, we'll have to see whether it's more of a, not wooing, but like, oh, I'm your family, you can trust me kind of dynamic, or if it's an interrogation type dynamic. And this actually, it was pointed out on a few podcasts that I listened to, and it's very interesting. Daemon has been back in King's Landing, knows Helena is here, has not talked to her. If you remember, Helena tapped into Daemon's vision sequence at the end of last season and showed herself to him as a key part of this, and he did not even think to go talk to her, unless it happened off screen, which I doubt. Maybe it'll happen next episode where Rhaenyra talks to her, but it's fairly weird that was one of the first things he did again, getting to King's Landing and having like Helena in their midst. But anyway, I'm interested to see where that goes. But to the core of what was on the tapestry, Aemon's situation, I think people are very much like Alice Rivers' like motivations are all over the place. Yes, and I think that is the intention. I think she is not conveying her true motivations to anyone. I think that this, everything here kind of directly contradicts everything she told to Daemon. I think she's manipulating both parties for a separate goal that hasn't been instructed yet. So I don't think it's bad writing, because I think we haven't seen the full breadth of it. And this is kind of like my me going off of like what I think from the book, because in the book, Alice Rivers is this figure that we never do get her true motivations, because Fire and Blood is actually supposed to have a sequel. The rough title is Blood and Fire, but where the story of this show, and we'll see if they probably will change that for the show, but where the story of this show and the book it's based on ends, Alice Rivers is like halfway through her plan, and it's happening in the background, and it's going to conclude in the first half of the next book, which I don't think we're ever going to get, unfortunately. But so it's interesting, because like, I can't say, oh, this is her plan, this is that, because we never finished her story yet. So I'm very interested to see how the show will take it, because I think the show will try to attempt to give us her plan and, convey what was actually happening with her. Maybe they spoke to George and got that too. I'm very interested to see how that goes, because right now what she's saying to Aemond is, there's a clutch of dragon eggs here at Harrenhal that I have, and by God, if Rhaenyra knew that was there, she would come and burn it immediately. She would be there a second. So it's good that she doesn't know. And they were actually they were actually laid by the dragon Dreamfire, who belonged to a not Rhaena from this show, a different Rhaena from a past generation, who's also a very interesting character that I really like from um so Fire and Blood. How it works is it's like essentially there's like two it's like a the first third of the book is actually Aegon the Conqueror's story. The middle third of the book is like Jaehaerys and or like Maegor into Jaehaerys and their generation, and the last third of the book is the events of this show, which is like the Dance of the Dragons, Rhaenyra, Green Faction, Black Faction story. So it's actually almost like three books in one, is how I would describe it. Like, and the show is choosing to adapt the last third of that. So I think it's a really cool book. Like, even if you watch the show, there's a lot you can get out of it that isn't in the show. And Rhaena, this that they're talking about the story is kind of from that middle section, that middle, like that almost like second story of the book. And she's a really good character from that section, so it's cool to see them allude to her as well. Here, so it seems like Alice wants to create a new line of Dragon Lords with their seat being at Harrenhal instead of King's Landing, and essentially start a new like dragon lineage. She says she wants to be Lady of the Water and him to be her Dragon Lord. And like, I was like, oh, this has got to be tapping into something in like old A Song of Ice and Fire, like lore mythology, and I couldn't find anything Lady of the Water based. So I'm not sure. It's invoking Night King or Night's King story from the books, not the Night King from the show. It's a different thing, but they just took the name for the Night King in the show and like kind of used it again, but it's a different thing. But if you've read the books, you know who it actually reminds me of that a little bit. And we don't really understand her full motivation here and she's really talking about per se. But it's interesting because it kind of directly clashes with what she was talking to Damon about last season, where she essentially was like pushing him forward to get him on his back on his feet and support Rhaenyra, because Rhaenyra needs to be on the throne in order for Daenerys and Jon Snow and everything with Bloodraven to happen in the future, and essentially for the events of Game of Thrones to happen in the future. Rhaenyra needs to take the throne now, and that was her goal there, and she like seemingly succeeded in it. And she talked about how she wanted Harrenhal too, but this is like a completely contradictory, clashing goal to that. And like I said, I think that means that these are all pieces of a puzzle that she's working on and she's trying to put together. It's very, she's supposed to be a direct parallel to Melisandre from the main series. Like, that's kind of her, role in the story, if you will. And it's very interesting because like it's similar to Melisandre in that we never really get her motivations fully. There's always some sort of manipulation going on, or like, and Melisandre's relationship with Stannis is very similar to Alice Rivers' relationship with Aemond. So I'm very interested to see where the show takes it, because, like I said, we don't get the full answers to that in the book. So I'd like for the show to give us, maybe they won't, maybe they'll stick to that, it only being like half of her story, because Alice Rivers goes on as a entity after this. But maybe they'll give us an answer, and I know it won't be like a book canon answer, but it'll be a cool interpretation, especially since they're taking interpretory liberties a lot. So I'm very interested to see where that goes. But Alicent going to Harrenhal is also very weird, because, like I sort of alluded to at the beginning of the episode, she does not go to Harrenhal in the book. She does not leave King's Landing, and maybe there's a point where on the route she gets taken back to King's Landing, something happens, she never makes it to Harrenhal. Whatever, I reserve judgment until we see what happens, but I'm very curious to see what's going to happen there, especially when, like, Aemon's mommy issue complex is going to happen with, like, his new girl Alice versus Allison, showing up. We'll see what happens there because I'm also very weirded. It's the same thing with Corliss, like where I'm like weirded out because like things are about to happen soon that for the story require Allison to be in King's Landing. Like, so I don't know what they're doing. I don't with that. But I'm not gonna complain about it. I'm not gonna say it was shit or anything until we actually see what happened. But anyway, think that about does it. This was a very solid episode, but also a nerve-wracking one, not just because of their deviations from the book that might cause big problems for like upcoming events, but also because they got 2 episodes left of this season and about 8 episodes next season, and we have a big chunk of the story to go, and they're going slow. Like, I'm very curious to where they're going to choose to end this show because there is so much of the story left and so little time to do it, and they must have a plan for how they're going to execute it because they wouldn't be going this slow at this point if they were. If they we're trying to adapt everything. So they're probably going to make some cuts and changes. And I honestly think they might be shifting into an entirely different story than what we got from the book. And you know what? If it's good, it's good. We'll just have to wait and see. So thank you all for watching / listening. I've been Professor of Thrones, and I will see you all for the next episode. The penultimate one, so we might see some crazy shit. We'll just have to wait and see. Thanks again. Talk to you later.